Whee! It's lashing! So this is the start of my 2-year review of just over 20,000 kilometers of a 2018 Triumph Tiger 1200 XCA. All the Tiger range in the 1200 is pretty much the same really, so it kind of applies to them all. It's just has spoke wheels, that's all. And I've already done other videos about whether I think some of the extras are worth it or not, so I'm not really going to go through every feature of the bike either. It's just a 2-year long-term ownership review. You get nothing from a journo on a bike. They're too afraid to say anything bad about anything, and if they do find something they're not keen on, they just tend to gloss over it or not mention it. What's great about this bike? I know, let's go. This video is called The Good, Bad and the Ugly, and here's the ugly. This bike's been off the road for more than 60 days in its first 18 months with electronic faults. Complete, total electronic failure. No lights, no nothing. And the dealer and Triumph unable to diagnose the error. That was in the height of summer this year. I lost the 2 main summer months. It's not an endemic problem with these bikes. I've just been really unlucky. There was an electronic module on board the bike, which they eventually found. But 2 months off the road, no loaner, and no, oh sorry about that from Mr. Triumph, they were sorry about it when I complained to them that nothing was being done. What the hell were they doing? And I was like, sorry about that, we'll have a look, we'll talk to your dealer. And I have to say, I can't fault the dealer, it's not the dealer's fault. Once the electronics gets to a certain stage on these big bikes, there's nothing they can do unless you bloody design the thing. But even Triumph struggled for a couple of months to sort this one out. So that's the ugly. But it isn't representative of this bike. It's not an unreliable bike. And what that makes you do, it questions, when I come to replace this bike, and I don't know whether I'd replace it in a year's time or 5 years time, who knows. When it comes to replacing the bike, you remember that service level. And you think to yourself, can I reward a manufacturer who let me sit without a bike for 2 months, a brand new bike? So that's my gripe anyway. It had starting issues right from the start, this bike. They just got worse and then disappeared altogether and then got catastrophic. But look, I'm over it now. I'm over it! There are bigger things in life to worry about, but that's the ugly. And it's not the norm though. It's not the norm ugly. These bikes don't have an unreliable reputation. The bad. It's not really so much bad. It's I don't think there's anything bad about this bike. So I'm going to call it the good, the mildly annoying features, and the ugly. I've already done the ugly. Mildly annoying features. This indicator switch is not very tactile at all. And when you're on a fast road, such as a motorway like this, you have to look down at your dash to actually see whether you've turned your indicator on. It's a really poor feeling. So I don't think Triumph are going to redo that switch gear just for that, because it's on so many bikes. But what they could do on this bike is have some sort of indicator repeater just up here somewhere on the screen. I mean, it is a touring bike really, so that could be a tiny filament wire and a little LED with a nighttime mode, so it's not blinding you, or a fibre optic cable coming out from the LED in there and just repeating up there. That way you know your indicators are on without taking your eyes off the road. That's my mildly annoying feature number 1. Mildly annoying feature number 2. Jesus, those metal turrets next, the front tyres. The noisiest shit. Now the heavier you are, I'm 18 stone, the heavier you are, the more pronounced it is. Load up with luggage and go a pillion and the thing drives you to distraction. Now a lot of tyres do this. I've changed the Bridgestone A41s and they do it somewhat, but nowhere near as the Metzlers. But I think that's quite common with a lot of bikes actually. You hear it on the GS forums about certain tyres. Geez, you don't want to be talking about tyres anyway. Everyone's got a good and bad story to say about every tyre. But I really found the OEM tyres on this noisy as shit. In fact, on my from new to first service video, I think, I'm driving down the road and I'm going, what's that bloody noise at the front? And at the time I didn't realise it was the tyres, but it's quite pronounced. Now I've got the Bridgestones on, it's not. And some people are putting on road tyres and getting rid of that noise completely. So I don't want to say it's a big deal. That's why it's in the marginally annoying category. What else is marginally annoying? Oh yeah, not having a bloody sat-nav, above clock sat-nav mount. And look, at the end of the day this is a touring bike. I don't know why. I mean, you can have it here on the handlebars, but it just saves you looking down all the time. But people come up with their own solutions instead. So my solution is probably the cheapest and naffest of all. I put a ram mount ball and I screwed it to that console above the clock and put a bit of foam underneath. But some other people have come up with some really nice gear. That's nice and portrait mode, isn't it? Yeah. So there are solutions, but not from Triumph. Rear brake pads, you might find you only get 5,000 miles out of them, or 8k. I only got 8,000 kilometers out of mine. It gets through them quite nicely. I use the link brakes all the time really. I rarely use the rear brake pedal now, and it's not a big deal though. They're cheap to buy, and if you don't want to do them yourself, the labour's very small from the dealer because it's such a quick job to do. So, and it's a simple job to do, so if you want to do it yourself you can as well. So it's not really a big deal. The Big Bird, it's a heavy bike and it carries its weight high. Now I say that, you got to put that into context. When you're on the move, obviously you don't even feel it, but you have to put it into context. You go and get a BMW K1600 GTL or something, and that'll be 75 kilos heavier. Goldwings, lots of big Harleys. So I put that weight into context. It's not a massive heavy bike, but it is a heavy bike that carries its weight up high. And if there was one bit of advice I give to anybody thinking of buying a Triumph Tiger 1200, is make sure you can flat foot it with the seat in the high position. That's the only advice I give. If you can't, don't buy it. Buy the low version. Definitely buy the low version, because you'll find yourself getting annoyed with yourself in car parks and gravelly things like this. It's not a bike to be tiptoeing on. You want to be flat-footed on this bike. You definitely want to be flat-footed on this bike. Now, don't just sit in at the showroom either. Take it for a test drive, because you need the engine running for the rear preload to set itself, so you know what the real ride height is based on your weight. It's probably at the top end of the marginally annoying, to be honest. So I would say don't buy it unless you can flat foot it. If you can't flat foot it and you like the bike, buy the low version. Here we are now, Glenmalure Lodge. So I'm going to get a coffee. This is a popular spot. Oh, that reminds me. The not so great feature. Clutch on this bike, it's reallastminute.com. It's not progressive at all. It's bloody terrible. You really do have to get used to it. You kind of do get used to it, but you'd rather you didn't have to. I don't like that. That's common. They're all like that. Oh, hello. Key fob out of range. No, it isn't. Oh, yeah, that's the annoying thing. Right. Key fob out of range. It isn't. There's my key fob. What that is interference from my powered tank ring. The key fob is very susceptible to electrical interference, and I only sussed that when someone on one of the forums, good forum actually, triumph-explorer.com I think it is, said his used to do the same with his cheap Chinese fogs he put on. As soon as he took the cheap Chinese fogs off, he stopped getting his key fob out of range. So the key fob is very susceptible to electrical interference, and that's in the bad category, along with the whole keyless ignition anyway. Bloody stupid. Especially if you've got an alarm. I know some people like it, but I don't. I'd quite happily have as a no cost option to delete the key, delete the keyless ignition. But it's look, it was just sitting there in the tank bag, that powered tank ring. There's nothing even taking any power off that tank ring, and it's a minor thing, you know. Mustn't grumble.
Right, that's Mr. Negative bit out of the way. I'm a pretty positive person, really. I like to say, I like to think. So let's go through some positive bits about the bike, and they do far outweigh the negatives. And I think the negatives are fairly minor things, but they are a bit annoying, mind. But they're fairly minor compared to the plus points of this bike. So let's have a look at some of the positives now.
What's this bike's forte? Well, this bike can absolutely crush mileage in any road condition with consummate ease and in superb comfort. That's how I would describe this bike. The quick shifter is an outstanding feature of this bike. Any side of the road, mate. It's fantastic at low speed as well. It's I don't associate it with, you know, caning it and getting a move on and everything like that. If you're going in and out of these small type of roads here and towns and stuff, it's great. It's absolutely brilliant on the downshift. It's very controlled. When I get to replace this bike, and I don't know when that'll be, but when I do, it'll have to be a bike with a quick shifter, and if it isn't as good as this, I wouldn't buy it. This quick shifter's brilliant. The suspension on this bike is brilliant. It's white power suspension, and I haven't found a single road of any style or category that's managed to fool it or get it out of shape. It's such high quality. The electronic part of the adjustment, okay, the preload is great, that's great, but you know, when you're adjusting the damping on this via the joystick, it's just like you're doing the same thing with a screwdriver on the top of the fork stanchions or the rear shock. There's nothing active or semi-active about the damping on this bike. There's one exception, but basically when if you start going across a really bad bumpy road, what it does, it changes the damping. Oh, I'm going to save this for another fucking time because I'm going to moan about the fucking thing, and I don't want to moan about the suspension because it's absolutely fantastic, and it keeps this bike under control all the time. 2 up, loaded, luggage, solo, any road you care to think of. And it's a testament to this bike, the quality of the mechanicals of the suspension, that I would do a 10-15 hour day on this bike without question. One of the reasons why it can crush mileage is because it's extremely comfortable in creating a wind envelope before you as well. It doesn't completely cocoon you like you know, like a big Goldwing would or anything like that. And if it's lashing with rain, your arms will get the rain, but the rest of your body is quite sheltered from it, which is great. But you can just sit here in a pouring rain, piling along at 120 on a motorway, and you just wouldn't be worried about the rain at all. For a fully loaded electronic bike, I like the simplicity of the dash, the options. It's not like sitting in front of the Starship bloody Enterprise. The dash and the choices for the setup of this bike are simple and intuitive. And you can customise your rider modes if you want. One of the main things you probably might do is you might adjust the damping setting for each one to suit you, but that's just a joystick. You don't even have to go to the setup menu to do it. Just change it in that rider mode and change it there and then on the screen. It's the same as doing it in the setup. But after that, I can't see you faffing around with any other setup, because you just don't have to. Hey up, it's a bit of an old pea super up here. This is the car park if you want to walk St. Kevin's Way. Which is over yonder. You can't see it. If I was really tight for cash, I'd buy the entry-level version of this bike without the TFT, because this bike is all about that engine and that suspension. And as I alluded to before, it says semi-active. There's nothing active happening with the damping on this bike, nothing at all. So once you dial in your damping settings on your entry-level bike, you might find yourself not changing it that often. You might change it if you're going loaded or 2 up, but when you're solo you might leave it the same. I'm working out your preload dead easy. If you don't want to be bothered with all that, working out your sag and all that sort of stuff, like, I think it's really easy, but if you don't want to be bothered, just go to your manual and use the recommended settings there. You'll see they're trying for a nice table in their manual for damping settings for sort of sportier riding or normal riding or 2-up riding, and it couldn't be easier to understand. There's not much to adjust, and it'll make all the difference to your ride, especially if you're, you know, off on a few days. So I'd sit, if I had a certain amount of money and it was only, you know, I think the base one of these is about 12 grand. You'd have as much fun as I'm having now as I am on the top of the range. Yeah, this bike is not affected by bad weather. If it's blowing a hoolie, this thing's got the weight to push through it. That's another reason why I wouldn't hesitate to go out in any weather at all. Well, apart from snow, obviously. It's a very stable bike. But as I said before, it's very versatile. Like, I'm just out for a bit of a day blast. And it's the type of bike you can do that with. I don't think I'd buy this bike though, or own this bike just to do the odd day blast though. You know, it's a lot of cash to have sitting around just for going out for a Sunday ride. I'd have a little 650 or something. And I don't crush continents either, even though this bike can do that. But it's a brilliantly versatile bike. Of course, if you're listening to this review because you're looking for a shaft drive bike, you're either considering a GS or GSA, this, a GS, GSA, FJ, FJR 1300, although that's a bit old school, an RT, although they seem to be falling out of fashion. Even Triumph couldn't sell enough of their trophy to keep making it, and it's the same engine as this. Guzzi, nice bike, but yeah, not a lot of power. I didn't think my Africa Twin had enough power. Last thing I want to do is go down to a Guzzi. So there's very few shaft drive bikes to choose from, really. I don't think I'd have a bike without cornering traction or ABS again either. I know, like, Bikes Forever have never had it, and my other Triumph doesn't have any of that stuff. It doesn't even have ABS. But when you're out and about, say places like I was just, you know, the Wicklow Mountains, and it's curvy, damp roads with a bit of leaf mould, it only takes you once to spit you off overcooking it on the throttle on these big bikes. See, that's great there, me being able to adjust that screen on the fly. at the touch of a button. Coming out of town. It's amazing how much you use it when you have it. So now I'm stuck behind this horse box. There's a good time to summarise my review. Say, would I recommend this bike? It'll have to be an absolute yes, even though I've had more than my fair share of problems with it, but I absolutely would recommend it. It's a bloody joy to drive. The suspension is brilliant. It's supremely comfortable. It'll crush mileage if you want it to. And it's something a little bit different. The proviso is that you can flat foot it completely on a test drive with the engine running, or if you can't, buy the low version. Otherwise, I say don't. What's another Gen 4 feature I'd like? Well, there's no point in me saying, oh, I'd like the bike to be 35 kilos less and have an extra 5 litres in the fuel tank and all that sort of stuff, because you're just describing, oh bloody hell, didn't put my glasses on, you're just describing a different bike. So for a Gen 4 there can only be minor mods really. I love the way on the dash you can declutter the system tray at the bottom and take off stuff that you're not interested in, and it just saves you scrolling through the dash while you're riding. Well, in a similar vein, I'd like to be able to disable rider modes. So when I press the rider mode button, instead of being presented with 6 rider modes to scroll through, I'd like to be able to say, right, look, I'm only going to use rain and road today, and disable those other rider modes to appear on the screen. So when I'm scrolling through the rider modes, then I know I only have to press the button once and it's going to switch from one to the other. So I can change the rider modes again without taking my eyes off the road, or with minimum time off the road, with minimum time with my eyes off the road. So that's what I'd like. I'd like to be able to disable rider modes, so when I press the rider mode button, it only gives me a choice of the rider modes I'm interested in. Now I know the selection does skip the off-road when you're on the move, so really my choice is only between 4 rider modes, but you're still scrolling through the bloody lot. Like here, it's wet up here, now I'm getting up higher, up the Wicklow Mountains. The roads were dry back down there, but you can see the mist. See the mist? It's just kind of misty, wet roads. So now if I knew I could just press my rider mode button once and know that I'd be in rain mode. But I can't, so I've got to scroll through. There it is, select. Now I'm in rain mode. It takes a lot of taking your eye off the road to do that. So anything you can do to improve that would be great. What other Gen 4 feature would I like? Well, I think one of the boon things about this bike is the automatic preload adjustment. There's no preload adjustment on the front, like a lot of bikes. But there is preload adjustment on the rear, it's electronic. There's no rider plus passenger, rider plus passenger plus luggage buttons, because it doesn't need it. Because there's a swing arm sensor, swing arm position sensor, connected by a rod to the swing arm. And it measures your weight and sets the preload accordingly. You never have to worry about preload again. Brilliant. But What it doesn't do, it doesn't alter the damping. Each rider mode has its own damping setting, and you can customize that. Very easy. Let's make a video on that, but it's so easy. Would I bother? I don't know. But I think there'd be a nice addition that when it weighs you, and whether you know you got extra load on a pillion or anything like that, generally the more load, the more damping you want as well. So it's not just the fact that, oh, I want, you know, firm damping because I'm driving sporty, or I want soft damping because, oh, the wife's on the back or anything like that. The more load, the more damping is required to control that load. And it'd be nice if that when the preload, the swing on position sensor measures that weight, it sets the preload, great, that it decided on a damping setting as well. So let's say when you're in normal road mode, it goes +2 up on the damping, for instance. Stiffens the damping up a tiny bit because I've got that extra weight. So in other words, adjustable damping rates per rider mode based on the preload weight. And just because you're adding more preload doesn't mean to say you're making the ride firmer, because you need more damping the more load you have to control that load. Bloody hell, it's getting it's getting misty up here. Thought I'd come up here for a coffee. Another one of my Gen 4 features I'd like a programmable screen that when you come into town in slow areas like this, it lowers down to a programmable height, and then when I get out of town and pick up speed, I like to have a programmable height back over some sort of threshold. Now I know you could say, oh yeah, but you'll hit that threshold and the thing will be going up and down like a lunatic. Well no, there'd have to be some sort of hysteresis on it, or an override. Because I find when I come into town, I like the screen lower. It's easier to see around. I don't need the wind protection. And then when you're out on the open road, come back up. It's a silly thing, like, but and I'm sure a lot of people might not even use it. But it's incredible how much I do use the adjustable screen. Sometimes when it's pissing down with rain, I'll actually lower it to its lowest position just to get a wind blast on my helmet to clear my visor. Bloody hell, this is a great drive, isn't it? Well, but I've saved the best till last. I've talked about how this bike can crush mileage, and it's because of this engine. It's a fantastically linear engine that just brings you up. It's smooth and manageable around town, no surprises in the mid-range, and it's just turbine smooth, linear torque, linear power more or less. There's nothing bipolar about this engine. It's completely predictable, and some people might say that's a bit boring. I actually like that, especially for touring, and it's very pillion friendly. I'm going camping. It's January the 8th, 7th, no, 12th, something like that anyway, and I'm fully loaded. It's blowing a hoolie, and this bike doesn't care. Here comes the rain. We're camping just northwest of Longford, above Lochray, and all morning there's this massive rain cloud all over Ireland, and I'm heading straight for it. I was hoping it was going to move north by the time I got near, but it's massive. I think I'm in for this weather till I get to the campsite. No better bike for it though, no better bike for it. They'll just push through this. There really is a lot of side winds on these exposed open roads, and the bike just shrugs it off. No, it's not affected, but it does shrug it off. Whee! It's lashing! That's why this camping trip is called Frank's Winter Challenge. Because the conditions are either going to be blustery, wet, snowy, sleety, all, none, or something. You never know. I don't mind. It's going to be fun putting up the tent. I reckon I'm up for a couple of Tesco's bags around the old knees, because that field's going to be soggy. But the tent will be dry once it's up, so that'll be great. But best of all, there'll be a pub. I was talking about weather protection earlier. In these conditions, it's only really your arms that get wet, and if you've got wet gear, it's fine. But your body's mostly protected by the push of air from the bike. There's a nice strong side wind. Let's blow me off the bike as I take my hand off the handlebar. Yeah, you're mostly protected really. It's only the arms that are kind of exposed. Like, you're not going to be completely dry, obviously. You're stopping in traffic, and if the rain's beating down behind you or whatever, but you are fairly well protected from this sort of weather, so it doesn't concern me. There's no doubt about this bike's engine though. It's perfectly fueled at any revs. Going around town and slow speed like this, there's no surprises. There's no surprises up or down. Slow speed, low fuel in any gear. It's just not phased by anything, despite Euro regs and all that stuff. And I think that's why the quick shifter works so well. Because the quick shifter has a really predictable power delivery to deal with. So this all-round engine package, that's what it is. It's an all-round engine package. It's exciting. It's not 200 horsepower outside or 170 horsepower outside and chain drive bike, but it's exciting enough. It'll pull like a train. You can put whatever you want on the bike, it'll pull like a train. And you know, it's just dead easy to ride. You never get tired of riding this bike. You're not thinking about how you're going to hit some massive power band. Just do whatever you want with that throttle on this. But speed does kill. This weather's a perfect example of the versatility of the adjustable screen, the electrical adjustable screen. So my visor is covered in water, obviously. It's raining. But at these kind of low speeds of like 100k, 60 mile an hour, I can lower my visor at the lowest position. You get a fantastic wind blast across my visor. My visor is staying completely water-free. I'm still getting plenty of wind protection on the body. I'm just getting that air blast from the top of the visor directly on the visor, or on the screen, directly on the visor. It's great if you need the extra visibility. I'll often lower it to clear my visor like that, because the old Bob Heath has only got a little wiper blade. So a quick detour. Just have a look at the banks. Banks of Loch Ray. Do you call them banks if it's a loch? I don't know. The edge of the water. Oh, it's very gravelly. Good job I've got an adventure bike. Just watch the tree doesn't take my head off. Oh, look at that view. So, Loch Ray. And the county... Oh, fuck me. That was... my whole bike was going then. Jeez, that gravel in the centre is mad deep. There's a little brown stain in my underpants now. Oh, hey. What's a wildlife? Wow. Oh, that's lovely. As the wind is creating like a shore-like effect. I will have to have a picky.
So this has gone on 10 minutes longer than I wanted it to. So I'm going to cut it now here and say that's pretty much all I've got to say about the bike after 2 years ownership. I'll definitely keep the bike. It's brilliant at long distance. It's just fantastic at long distance. And that's my my overarching goal for a big bike. And it certainly fits the bill on that. Cheers. Thanks for watching.
Good old Tiger.